On March 25, 1911, a spark ignited a fire that would forever change the landscape of labor rights in America. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, perched high above the bustling streets of New York City's Greenwich Village, became an inferno in a matter of minutes. Trapped inside, hundreds of young immigrant women, their dreams of a better life going up in smoke, faced a horrifying choice: burn or jump. The fire, visible for miles across the city, became a horrifying spectacle, drawing helpless onlookers to the scene as firefighters desperately tried to reach the trapped workers. The flames consumed everything in their path, leaving behind a scene of unimaginable devastation and a city grappling with the true cost of unchecked industrial greed. The Triangle Waist Company, owned by Max Planck and Isaac Harris, was a notorious example of the exploitative sweatshops that proliferated in the early 20th century. These sweatshops were infamous for their harsh working conditions and relentless pursuit of profit at the expense of their workers' well-being. Planck and Harris, Russian immigrants who had clawed their way to the top of the garment industry, were known as the Shirtwaist Kings. Their rise to prominence was marked by their ability to capitalize on the booming demand for ready-made women's clothing. Their factory, occupying the top 3 floors of the Ash Building, churned out thousands of the fashionable shirtwaists that were all the rage among working women. These garments became a symbol of modernity and independence for many women entering the workforce.
The pursuit of profit, however, came at a steep price for their workers. The relentless drive to maximize production often led to the neglect of basic safety measures. Crammed into overcrowded workrooms, hundreds of young women, mostly recent immigrants from Italy, Russia, and Eastern Europe, toiled for long hours in unsafe and unsanitary conditions. These women faced constant pressure to meet high production quotas, often at the cost of their health and safety. They worked 6 days a week, often for more than 10 hours a day, earning meager wages that barely allowed them to survive in the city's teeming tenements. Despite their hard work, many of these women lived in poverty, struggling to provide for themselves and their families.
The Triangle Factory's workforce was largely made up of young, unskilled women and girls, some as young as 14. These young workers were often the primary breadwinners for their families, bearing a heavy burden at such a tender age. Lured by the promise of steady work and a chance to escape the grinding poverty of their home countries, these new arrivals to America found themselves trapped in a cycle of exploitation. They had hoped for a better life, but instead, they faced harsh working conditions and meager pay. The factory's advertisements, plastered on the walls of immigrant neighborhoods, promised girls wanted high pay, easy work. But the reality was far different. The promises of high pay and easy work were nothing more than a cruel deception.
The work was tedious and demanding, requiring the women to operate heavy, dangerous sewing machines for hours on end. The machines were not only difficult to handle, but also posed significant safety risks, leading to frequent injuries. The air was thick with dust and lint from the fabric, and the lack of proper ventilation made the workrooms unbearably hot and stifling, especially during the summer months. The oppressive heat and poor air quality took a toll on the workers' health. The constant noise of the machines was deafening, and the women were allowed few breaks during their long shifts. The relentless clatter of the machinery added to their exhaustion, making each day a grueling ordeal.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was a disaster waiting to happen. The factory's cramped and cluttered workrooms, filled with flammable fabrics and highly combustible sewing machine oil, were a fire hazard of the highest order. The building itself, though touted as fireproof, lacked adequate fire escapes, and the existing ones were poorly maintained and difficult to access.
On the afternoon of March 25, 1911, a spark, likely from a discarded cigarette or a malfunctioning sewing machine, ignited a pile of fabric scraps on the 8th floor. The fire spread with terrifying speed, fueled by the abundance of flammable materials and whipped into a frenzy by the open windows that acted like chimneys, drawing the flames upward.
Section 5. The day the windows were locked. As the fire raged through the 8th and 9th floors, panic gripped the workers.
The factory's single fire escape, already burdened with the weight of fleeing workers, buckled and collapsed, sending dozens plummeting to their deaths on the street below.
The factory's exit doors, it was later discovered, had been locked from the outside, a common practice by factory owners to prevent theft and unauthorized breaks.
trapped on the top 3 floors, with flames blocking the stairwells and the fire escape useless. The workers faced an impossible choice.
Some, driven to desperation, leaped from the windows, their bodies falling like rain upon the horrified onlookers below.
Others huddled together, seeking solace in their final moments as the fire consumed the building.
Section 6. The aftermath. The fire burned for less than 30 minutes, but in that short time it claimed the lives of 146 workers, most of them young women and girls. The victims were trapped by locked doors and inadequate fire escapes, making escape nearly impossible.
The fire department, ill-equipped to handle a fire of that magnitude in a high-rise building, could only watch helplessly as the flames raged out of control. Their ladders were too short to reach the upper floors, and their hoses lacked the pressure to combat the inferno.
The fire's toll was staggering, leaving an indelible mark on the city and the nation. It highlighted the dire need for reform in workplace safety and labor laws.
The streets around the ash building were littered with bodies, their broken forms a testament to the horror of that day. Families were left devastated, and the community was plunged into mourning.
The city mourned, and the nation reeled in shock and outrage as the full extent of the tragedy became known. Public outcry led to significant changes in labor laws and building codes.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire had exposed the human cost of industrial greed and the inadequacy of existing safety regulations. It served as a catalyst for change, sparking a movement that would eventually lead to better protections for workers across the country.
Section 7. The trial. The public outcry following the fire was immediate and immense.
The tragedy sparked a wave of anger and indignation, directed at the factory owners, who were seen as greedy and indifferent to the plight of their workers.
Blank and Harris, though indicted on charges of manslaughter, were acquitted by a jury sympathetic to the plight of businessmen.
The trial, however, brought to light the appalling conditions that had existed within the factory and the negligence that had contributed to the fire's devastating toll.
The testimony of survivors, many of them still bearing the physical and emotional scars of that day, painted a harrowing picture of the factory's unsafe conditions and the callous disregard for worker safety. Section 8. The public response. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was a watershed moment in the American labor movement. The tragedy galvanized public support for workers' rights and led to sweeping reforms in workplace safety regulations. The fire had exposed the human cost of unregulated industrial capitalism and the urgent need for change.
Across the country, labor unions, social reformers and progressive politicians rallied to demand better working conditions, stricter safety regulations, and an end to the exploitation of workers. The fire had ignited a movement that would transform the relationship between labor and capital in America.
Section 9. The investigation. In the wake of the fire, the state of New York established a factory investigating commission, tasked with examining the conditions in factories across the state. The commission, led by Frances Perkins, a young social worker who would later become the nation's first female Secretary of Labor, conducted an exhaustive investigation, interviewing thousands of workers and visiting hundreds of factories.
The commission's findings were shocking, revealing widespread safety violations, unsanitary working conditions, and rampant exploitation of workers, particularly women and children. The Commission's report became the basis for a series of groundbreaking labor laws in New York State, setting new standards for workplace safety, fire prevention, and child labor laws.
Section 10. Legacy of the Ashes. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, though a tragedy of unimaginable proportions, had a profound and lasting impact on the American labor movement. The fire's legacy can be seen in the countless lives saved by improved workplace safety regulations, the strengthened rights of workers to organize and bargain collectively, and the heightened awareness of the importance of social justice. The fire also served as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of marginalized communities, particularly immigrant workers, who often face exploitation and dangerous working conditions in their pursuit of a better life. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, though a painful reminder of the human cost of greed and indifference, stands as a testament to the power of collective action and the enduring fight for social justice. Section 11. A new era for workers' rights. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was a turning point in American history, ushering in a new era of labor rights and workplace safety regulations. The tragedy, though born out of unimaginable suffering, led to meaningful and lasting change, improving the lives of millions of workers and leaving an indelible mark on the American conscience. The fire's legacy serves as a reminder that the fight for social justice is ongoing and that vigilance is required to protect the most vulnerable members of society. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, though a tragedy of immense proportions, ultimately became a catalyst for positive change, ensuring that future generations would work in safer conditions and enjoy the fruits of their labor with dignity and respect.